Well, let me start us off with prayer, and then I'm going to introduce Justin and hand it over to him. If you're able to, bow your heads with me. Lord, I thank you so much that we have the opportunity to gather at this time online. Thank you so much for Justin, our speaker tonight. I pray that our ears would be open to hearing whatever it is you want to share with us, Lord, through Justin. I ask that Christ, that you would be present and among us tonight as we Zoom, and that everything, all the conversation that we have, all of our listening, and everything that Justin has to share, Lord, that it would bring you on glory. We ask all of this in your most holy and precious name. Amen. All right, so to give you a little more information on Justin, Justin is a speaker and an author, and for the last 7 years, Justin has pretty much exclusively been doing discipleship work with young adults with disabilities, and so he is really excited to share more about that with you guys tonight. So without any further ado, Justin, I'm going to make you our focus, and you can go ahead and take it away.
Fantastic. It is wonderful to be with y'all this evening. And you know I'm from West Texas because we're exactly 23 seconds in, and I've already started in with the y'all. That is going to happen at timer 7 tonight, so just be prepared. And as we are all confronting this new Zoom reality, a couple of warnings just right off the bat. I'm using my cell phone as I often do for these meetings, and if I need to check my battery or charge my battery, I will give you a warning, and then we'll do that. I'll try not to make you seasick on the way there, but I'll at least warn you before that happens. But as I said, and as Liz pointed out in the introduction, I am thrilled to be here to have a conversation with you about the unique experience of living out of a diverse embodiment, or what we would classically know as a disabled embodiment or a person with disabilities. And as Liz said in the intro, I've spent the last 7+ years doing mostly discipleship and spiritual formation with individuals with a wide variety of disabilities through an organization and a ministry that my wife and I founded called the Julian Way. And the Julian Way is based off of and named after the 15th century mystic who lived in England, actually Norwich. She's Julian of Norwich. And one of her key tenets in her main work was that all of God's creation is God's good creation. So that's gonna be our overriding thought thread or principle that we're going to operate under tonight, and that my ministry, or I should say our ministry, the Julian Way, has attempted to operate under for 7 years, is that there is no fault, there is no mistake, there is no disability is not a lack of something, it is not a missing of something, that the disabled embodiment is a mark of God's extreme and wonderful diversity and unique vision for this large and wonderful world we live in. how I got to that point is quite the journey, and I will not make you suffer through excruciating detail. It's not going to be like, well, when I was 5 and then on from there. I'm just going to briefly kind of give you an overview of my life journey and then talk more about interacting with people with disabilities and what has come to really form my thought and empowers me to know that people with diverse physical and developmental embodiments are not just important in God's creation, but if they aren't central, then the church is really lacking something. And occasionally I will say, excuse me, as I take a drink of water. So if you would have told me at any time from about 8 years old, when I started to begin to have thoughts that any child would, from about 8 years old until about 21 or 22, that I would start a disability ministry and focus most of my ministerial career and calling around persons with diverse physical embodiments. I wouldn't have been hostile to that vision, but I would have, let's say, been like a fish out of water or looked at you sort of sideways, because I grew up in a completely able-bodied household with parents who recognized my difference and who honored my difference. My mom was in special education for a number of years and an elementary school principal for almost 30 years, and my father was a judge and a lawyer, so high standards. But my brothers were able-bodied and my friends were able-bodied, so I grew up, thankfully, in a way, just sort of going with the flow, and I was never assumed to be different because I was disabled. I was never assumed to be unable to participate because I was disabled. It was really a grace unto itself that I was placed in a family.
Can I get a thumbs up? Awesome. Awesome. All right. Well, let me start us off with prayer, and then I'm going to introduce Justin and hand it over to him. If you're able to, bow your heads with me. Lord, I thank you so much that we have the opportunity to gather at this time online. Thank you so much for Justin, our speaker tonight. I pray that our ears would be open to hearing whatever it is you want to share with us, Lord, through Justin. I ask that Christ, that you would be present and among us tonight as we Zoom, and that everything, all the conversation that we have, all of our listening, and everything that Justin has to share, Lord, that it would bring you on glory. We ask all of this in your most holy and precious name. Amen. All right, so to give you a little more information on Justin, Justin is a speaker and an author, and for the last 7 years, Justin has pretty much exclusively been doing discipleship work with young adults with disabilities, and so he is really excited to share more about that with you guys tonight. So without any further ado, Justin, I'm going to make you our focus, and you can go ahead and take it away.
Fantastic. It is wonderful to be with y'all this evening, and you know I'm from West Texas, because we're exactly 23 seconds in, and I've already started in with the y'all. That is going to happen at timer 7 tonight, so just be prepared. And as we are all confronting this new Zoom reality, a couple of warnings just right off the bat. I'm using my cell phone as I often do for these meetings, and if I need to check my battery or charge my battery, I will give you a warning, and then we'll do that. I'll try not to make you seasick on the way there, but I'll at least warn you before that happens. But as I said, and as Liz pointed out in the introduction, I am thrilled to be here to have a conversation with you about the unique experience of living out of a diverse embodiment, or what we would classically know as a disabled embodiment or a person with disabilities. And as Liz said in the intro, I've spent the last 7+ years doing mostly discipleship and spiritual formation with individuals with a wide variety of disabilities through an organization and a ministry that my wife and I founded called the Julian Way. And the Julian Way is based off of and named after the 15th century mystic who lived in England, actually Norwich. She's Julian of Norwich. And one of her key tenets in her main work was that all of God's creation is God's good creation. So that's gonna be our overriding thought thread or principle that we're gonna operate under tonight, and that my ministry, or I should say our ministry, the Julian Way, has attempted to operate under for 7 years, is that there is no fault, there is no mistake, there is no disability is not a lack of something, it is not a missing of something, that the disabled embodiment is a mark of God's extreme and wonderful diversity and unique vision for this large and wonderful world we live in. How I got to that point is quite the journey, and I will not make you suffer through excruciating detail. It's not going to be like, well, when I was 5 and then on from there. I'm just going to briefly kind of give you an overview of my life journey and then talk more about interacting with people with disabilities and what has come to really form my thought and empowers me to know that people with diverse physical and developmental embodiments are not just important in God's creation, but if they aren't central, then the church is really lacking something. And occasionally I will say, excuse me, as I take a drink of water. So if you would have told me at any time from about 8 years old when I started to begin to have thoughts that any child would, from about 8 years old until about 21 or 22, that I would start a disability ministry and focus most of my ministerial career and calling around persons with diverse physical embodiments. I wouldn't have been hostile to that vision, but I would have, let's say, been like a fish out of water or looked at you sort of sideways, because I grew up in a completely able-bodied household with parents who recognized my difference and who honored my difference. My mom was in special education for a number of years and an elementary school principal for almost 30 years, and my father was a judge and a lawyer, so high standards. But my brothers were able-bodied and my friends were able-bodied, so I grew up, thankfully, in a way, just sort of going with the flow, and I was never assumed to be different because I was disabled. I was never assumed to be unable to participate because I was disabled. It was really a grace unto itself that I was placed in a family by God where the expectations for me looked different because I was physically, I had to express my goals differently. I have learning disabilities, which is common, some of you might know, common for a number of physical disabilities to come with learning disabilities, and especially cerebral palsy. I'm extremely dyslexic, and to this day, probably function straight reading level, in all honesty. I'm about a sixth grader, which created some really interesting challenges as I was authoring a book about 3 years ago. But never once did my family expect anything less of me, or never once did my brothers not expect me to be with our friends and to hang out and to go through all of the ups and downs of, being a teenager and what the weirdness and the joy that life is. Now, I had I have a twin brother, which is also not uncommon for those with cerebral palsy. But I'm not going to tell you that we loved each other. We were best friends all the way through. In fact, quite the opposite. But I had a very normal, or quote unquote normal, upbringing, and I made it all the way through high school and excelled in high school and was a state debate champion and given every opportunity to excel. And that's really the number one goal, the number one sort of takeaway that I want to kind of frame for you, and that has been reshaped and contoured for me as I've done disability ministry the last 7 years, is that it doesn't matter what the intellectual or physical level of your loved one or of you, if you experience disability, of what your intellectual or physical capabilities according to the world are. We all have something we can give to the kingdom of God and to create for ourselves and those around us a better world. So basically, everyone has something to contribute. And that was a lesson that was in me and given to me by my parents and by my circumstance from very early on. But the downside of the way I grew up, if you can call it downside, that might be a little harsh, is I had about 2 weeks a year where my disability or my physical and developmental reality was primary, where I could really see others that looked like me, because I went to summer camp at the Texas Lions camp in Kerrville, Texas, down near San Antonio. And that was really the only 2 weeks of the year where I consistently saw kids who looked like me, whose hands moved like me, and they still do today, as you can see, who talked like me. So as I grew up, I always thought my disability was unique, but I thought it was something to work around. Or I was raised in a great church, and I still have a mentor today that was, as I checked the time, that was my youth minister growing up, who is still a deeply formative presence in my life, even as I have my own ministry career. But I grew up in a rather evangelical church environment where my disability was something to be overcome, or as I say in my book, and disability advocate research or disability rights research would say it like this: my disability was problematized, something to be conquered or faced or dealt with. So I always sort of grew up in that mindset, and I even took that mindset into college as I got involved in the Wesley Foundation at West Texas A&M, where I went to college, and began to explore a call for ministry. I was never told I could do something, but a large part of that was because I never let anybody tell me no, because by the time they would have told me no, I was already doing it or already in the middle of it, and it would have been really awkward to ask me to leave. So, that has kind of been my MO from the beginning. If I'm gonna fail, I'm gonna fail spectacularly, and I'm going to learn something, and I'm gonna really require the environment to change around me, because I'm gonna be there anyway. And in college and in graduate school, that was not the most comfortable way to live. But as I got to know myself in ministry, and began to hear a calling from God, it would really become formative for the way I would conduct my ministry and the sort of discipleship and advocacy work I do today. So I was saying I grew up in a situation where disability was not looked down upon, and nobody would ever tell me I didn't have the right to do whatever I wanted or be wherever I wanted, but it was problematized. So fast forward to about 2011. So right now, just over 9 years ago, I had worked for a while at the Texas Tech Wesley Foundation as my first real ministry job out of seminary. I was really doing well there, doing spiritual direction and discipleship with college students, which I love to do. And my wife got called to come, my wife got called to go to seminary, so we came back to Dallas. I graduated from Perkins in 2008, and we moved back to Dallas after 3 years in Lubbock, Texas in 2011, so my wife could start seminary. And I always joke I was ordained in West Texas, the Northwest Texas Conference. I was there for exactly 7 minutes, and we moved to Dallas. So when we got back to Dallas, I had left a really good job in Lubbock, surrounded by people that have known me at church camps and at church and my community since I was 10 or 11 years old. So they'd always seen Justin as Justin Hancock and known about my disability, but I was in my bubble. I was comfortable, just sort of gliding and letting my disability be incidental to my life, right? And we moved back in 2011, and I went on interview after interview after interview after interview after interview, and didn't get one callback. And I'm not a bad interview. And I said, God, I left a good job. I left a comfortable existence. People knew me. People were not only okay with my disability, but I was Justin. I was quote unquote normal. What are you doing? And God began to speak to me and say, you've got something around the corner, but I need you to shift the way you're thinking. And as my wife and I grappled with finding me employment, and we kept running into disability-related hurdles, I began to talk to God, and we had gotten involved with the Missional Wisdom Foundation, where I work now, and their initiative to do intentional Christian community and apartment worship with African refugees. And my wife led the music there. I did a little bit of teaching there, and we fell in love with that sort of communal support, living together, eating together every Sunday, and just getting to know one another's life story of our African refugee friends. And one Saturday morning, we're at Bagels, because my wife and I still go on a bagel date every Saturday, and now we take our 18-month-old son to still have bagels. It's the world coming full circle, I guess. And as we were on that Saturday morning bagel date, I said, so what would you think about doing intentional Christian community in the context of disability? And my wife sort of stared at me and said, okay, what do you mean? And I said, I don't know, but I think God is leading me in that direction. And we came to know that there are so many things that make disability an isolating experience. and a othering experience. And a couple months before we left Lubbock, I found myself in the Social Security office reapplying for my Medicaid benefits in this office with ugly green plastic chairs, white walls, and asking me to take a number, but not really knowing any of my story. And I said, Christ has got to have a better story than that. Christ has got to, my embodiment has got to mean more than just a number on a government form. So we said yes to this vision of being in community and praying about how we could reach into the disabled population. And that really set me on an odyssey of writing a book over a 5-year process from 2013 to 2018, where I learned so much about myself, and that there was this wonderful culture of activism and people who raised a ruckus to make sure that folks with disabilities had equal rights to buses, and who made noise and were proud of their disability and were just proud to be physically and developmentally different and didn't think it was wrong or something to be made a problem or to be changed. And around that time, I started reading Julian of Norwich and her book, Revelations of Divine Love. And in it says, all of God's creation is God's good creation. And that word, that message took hold of my heart. And God began to say to me, you are okay. This is your work. I'm putting these people in front of you for this work. And guys, you have to know that for years I had tried, like I said in the beginning, my upbringing was never hostile to my disability, but I ran the other way every time somebody mentioned disability ministry, because I didn't want to be that guy. I didn't want to be typecast. So God began to talk to me about working with people with disabilities, and I said, what do I know about having a disability? And God tapped me on the shoulder and said, this is who you are. This is not just something you can make lemonade out of lemons. Your embodiment is who I created you to be. And it's godly, and I like it, and I didn't make a mistake. And this is the reason that you would have those conversations with me in high school and say to me, God, why am I in a wheelchair? This sucks right now. Will I ever date? And will I ever have a normal life? And God would always answer yes. And I have a purpose for you, so just relax. Or something like that. Not quite that colloquial. But in 2013, as I began to dream about our community and about the people we would reach, and writing my book about the history of disability and disability theology, I said, God, what if I do it and nobody shows up? And God, about 4 months later, Perkins had about double the amount of students with disabilities as they did the year before. So God was not only making a way, he was dropping people on my doorstep. And throughout the time that I've done this work of working with people with disabilities to discover that they aren't mistakes, that God means for them to be this way, and that their disability embodiment is beautiful. I've learned a couple of key facts or a couple of key truths that I want to share with you. And I just want to make sure that I'm staying on time. And I think we're good. But the number one truth that I want to convey to you tonight is there is no poverty or no barrier like low expectations. And as family members and friends and loved ones with disabilities, those with disabilities, or if you have a disability yourself, that's what I would tell you is raise the expectations for those folks in your life who are differently embodied. It might look different, it might look slower, it might look a little herky-jerky from every now and then, but if people and society does not expect that persons with disabilities are gonna show up in every walk of life, they will never ever see us. And really the next truth I would share with you is, as loved ones or parents, or even as, again, persons with disabilities yourselves, the story of disability is valuable. The story of unique physical and developmental embodiment is valuable. And as people of faith, and people of faith, particularly in a place of influence like Highland Park and that surrounding neighborhood, you have in your hands the ability to create and open whole new worlds for individuals with disabilities. And that's beautiful and that's scary, because you know what that means. People with disabilities and our loved ones will fail, and people will laugh, and people might be mean, and people might be harsh. But you know what? If I have learned anything in the last 7 years from the dozens and dozens of people and dozens of 16 to 35-year-olds that I've worked with, they want a chance to fail spectacularly. In the Missional Wisdom Foundation, we call it failing upward. And the number one thing I always tell parents is, you know your loved one, you know what they're capable of, and you know what their threshold is for pain or embarrassment or what have you, but never close your mind to being surprised. And never, I understand that the prospect of letting someone who might be medically vulnerable or emotionally or intellectually different try something is daunting, but although I would never advocate for someone putting themselves in a in a position for physical harm. I know persons with disabilities who are yearning to try new things, and those are only possible if, as scripture tells us, the rough places are made plain and the valleys are made low. We need to be a part of the church and a part of communities of faith, not so that someone else can raise our voice or give us a voice, but so that people with disabilities can find their own voice and their own speech and their own way of articulating their God-centered self. I want to take questions very shortly, but I'll sort of end this part of this rather scattershot version of my history and my mission by telling you the story of how the Julian Way got its start. In 2013, I got to go to the what was then the Summer Institute for Theology and Disability, which is a incredibly wonderful place of disabled scholars, theologians, pastors, and lay people talking about disability theology. And if you're a theology nerd with a disability like myself, that's practically like Woodstock for, boy, could I have picked an older cultural reference? I don't know. But that group was trying to do good work even then, but they had a bit of an issue having persons who were not disabled as the keynote speakers, getting up and talking about disability. And several of us who lived with the daily reality of disability were about ready to mutiny. And the keynote speaker, who I will not name, got up. If you want to know the name, you can read my book, which is, yes, a shameless ploy, and I understand that. But got up the last day of the conference and said it is the job of the church to become the voice for those with disabilities who have no voice of their own. And several of us with disabilities looked around the room and walked out or rolled out or limped out, or, however we conveyed ourselves, and said, no, thank you. We will be our own voice in any number of speech or any manner of speech, sign language, slurred speech, what have you. We will have our own voice. And at that point, God said, look, if you don't do this, I'll move on to someone who will. And again, I said, God, you've given me this for about 1.5 years, and I still have no idea what I'm doing. But okay, that's enough. I'll do it. And I have made my life's work the last 7 years helping folks with disabilities and their families, much like those of you who I assume are in this room tonight, find their own voice and speak the language of faith in a way that is comfortable and works for them and is unique and expresses God's uniqueness, because God is so much bigger and so much more capable of laughter and joy and creativity than I think we give God credit for. Anyone who's been at the feast at Highland Park for longer than about 45 seconds knows the pure joy of God that's expressed in that community and in the long disability community at large. But I'm rambling, and I would love to answer questions or hear your thoughts, and I will start this portion of the talk by saying you can literally ask me any question you want. There is no question off limits. And if you want to have a longer conversation with me, I'm a trained and certified spiritual director, and we can find a way to have a long conversation even after this concludes. But I'll take questions, and I thank you again for listening to my somewhat rambly story, but I hope it had an impact, and I'm delighted to answer any questions. So.
Awesome. Thank you, Justin. Okay, so friends, just as a reminder, I do see the Spittler's hand up already, and I'll get to you in just a minute. If you do have a question, please turn your video camera on and wave your hand by your camera so that I can see you, and I will try my best to get to everybody. So I'll go ahead and I'm going to unmute the Spittlers here. So, all right, go for it. Stan and Shirley.
Hey. Hello to you, sir. And we really enjoyed your presentation as fellow Red Raiders.
Hey, there we go.
We passed along some information that I found very interesting in your presentation. Shirley and I have been volunteers in Special Olympics for 30, 35 years. And when I talk to new volunteers, what I always tell them is, don't lower your expectations of what these guys can do, because they are fabulous in their abilities. And that's such a great comment that you made. Lower expectations of these guys is the worst thing you can do. If you expect it, you'll get plus many more. I mean, they just do great. So, yeah. Great presentation. Loved it, and looking for other things from you because I know you can do it.
Yeah, Justin, we've heard you speak before. We've read your book. I love your book, and I think your whole outlook for the disability world is where everybody should be. Amen.
Well, thank you, and I will answer the comment about the book by saying you're the ones who read my book. It's all no, but it's always nice to meet people who have been touched by the work and who seek to be involved in the way that you guys have. I wish there were more like you, but the long ministry at Highland Park and the feast is a testament to the fact that the thought around disability is slowly changing, and the aspect of not lowering expectations goes to we're beginning to see a shift where those with disabilities are in leadership of the church, and that's and civically in leadership, and that's where the world needs to be, and we're getting there. So I thank you guys for sort of leading that charge and for your kind words.
Any other questions for Justin? Oh, is that Leah? Did I see your hand? Is that right? Okay, Leah, I'm going to unmute you. Go ahead.
What's your question?
Hey, Leah.
Your talk was divine.
Oh, thank you. Excellent. I appreciate that.
Is that your Just want to make a comment, Lee, or do you have a question to follow up?
Just a compliment. Compliment.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much. All right. I'm scrolling through. Anybody else? Oh, yes. Sue, I see your hand. Wonderful. Hold on. Give me a second. I'm going to unmute you. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, Justin. Oh, I really, really enjoyed your message tonight. I was wondering if you're available to do any counseling through the Belong Ministry. Certainly it would be distance conferencing for a while, but perhaps as time goes on, there would be another opportunity.
Well, you know, I'm sorry, is it Sue?
Yes.
Okay. I am currently as I said, a trained and certified spiritual director, and I am sort of the next evolution of my work is going to be focusing on that spiritual formation piece and spiritual direction piece more full time, and I would love to reach out to the disability community in that way as much as I possibly could. So yeah, I think there's let's talk about that and dream about that. I would enjoy being a part of that as much as I was able.
Well, you are a gift, and you are gifted in that way. So I'm going to pray that you go forward and that we get to be a part of it.
Excellent. I look forward to the journey.
Okay.
Justin, you let me know if you feel comfortable with this, but friends, if anyone is interested in contacting Justin, if you maybe will follow up with me, and then I can send out Justin's email address to you. Does that sound like a good plan, Justin?
That is perfect. That is just, yeah,
Okay.
excellent.
Great. I'll be on the lookout for that. So yes, friends, please, if anyone wants to contact him, please let me know, and then I will be happy to share his contact information with you. All right. Any other questions? I'm looking for hands. Okay.
Liz?
Yes.
Justin's presentation will be available. It's recorded. How could we access that?
So I am going to, so we're going to save it, and it's definitely going to go on the Belong Ministries YouTube channel.
Okay.
And then I'll probably talk with my team about maybe pushing that out on the Facebook page, or maybe in our newsletter. I'm not quite sure yet, but we will try and make it available to the most people.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for your questions. Okay. Anybody else? I want to make sure I'm not missing anyone.
I think
Okay.
Paula had a question.
Did Paul? Okay, Paula, did you have a question?
I did.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Hi. Justin, first of all, thank you so much. You're just an incredible inspiration. I know to those who are differently embodied, and thank you for that term I learned tonight, and also for those of us who are not. You clearly do a lot of work within the disability community. Tell me a little bit about what your efforts are for those who either don't have a disability or don't have experience working with people with disability. What are your messages to them? How do you reach out to that part of our community?
Well, that's a really interesting question, and quite the segue. I'm really stunned at the way God works, because I was gonna try to get to that through the sort of closing remarks, and couldn't have provided a better segue if I did it myself. So thank you very much. I do a variety of things. I'm an ordained deacon, which means I'm not connected to a local church on staff per se, but I am affiliated with the work of Oak Lawn United Methodist Church, and I travel and speak and preach at any United Methodist Church and some non-United Methodist churches that will have me as many Sundays as I can. I do spiritual direction, which is kind of like one-on-one spiritual counseling, but focusing much more on helping people discover the image of God and where they are in their journey of spirituality and of discovering God. I do that both with the disabled population, but mostly with the classically what we would consider the able-bodied population. But if I had a message for everybody, it would kind of be the same. The same as I tell my folks with disabilities, but maybe a different spin. Everyone has something unique that they're called to do, and some sort of God-shaped impression. Some call it a whole. I don't really like that language, but some sort of God instinct or a calling from God that they are being called to journey towards. And it's really my life's mission as a spiritual director and spiritual companion to help people be their most authentic selves. Because I think when we can know what God has for us, we know ourselves better. And when we can know ourselves better, we know how to respond to God's calling. So that's really what I do in both the disability and the able-bodied context. It's just, I get to spend my life helping people become who they were meant to be, as I like to say. And I can't believe, don't tell anybody, but I can't believe they pay me to do this.
Thank you. All right. Any other questions coming in? Justin, I'm not seeing any other questions. I'm going to check one more time. No, I think that's it. So do you have any other closing comments for us?
Well, again, it's such an honor and a privilege to be with you, or to have been with you tonight. I would like to mention that I know a couple of folks have read my book. The book is called The Julian Way, A Theology of Fullness for All of God's People. Because we in the Julian Way, and personally in my ministry, I really don't like the wholeness concept, because I believe everybody is whole, regardless of their physical or developmental embodiment. So it's the Julian Way, a theology of fullness, and it really tracks the ways that culture tends to see disability now, the disability civil rights movement, and the way that the church has interacted with disability down through the ages in both positive and not so positive ways. So if you really want to get a slightly deeper dive into my theology and sort of what we're about, you can pick up my book and find it on Amazon, Kindle, or if you go to missionalwisdomfoundation.com and go to our store and order it that way. Frankly, we get a little bit more money, and we would always appreciate that. So I look forward to hearing from you, and I'm always available to have further conversations or journey with you on a spiritual direction if that's something you're interested in. I'll leave Liz my email, and I just thank you so much for letting me come and share some time and a Zoom window with you this evening. Thank you so much.
Well, Justin, we are so grateful for you and for all the wisdom that you shared with us tonight. And friends, I also the Resource Center does have a copy of Justin's book. I've read it as well. I'm going to do a shameless plug for you, Justin. It's a really wonderful piece of literature to read and really opened my eyes to some things. It was a great learning opportunity for me as well. So thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for being a resource for all of us and for sharing your wisdom with us. We really appreciate it. So friends, if we were in person, I think we would clap for Justin and to thank him for his time. So can we do a sign clap for Justin, because we are so appreciative of you. I don't know if you can see all of us, but everyone is saying thank you so much, Justin.
Oh, thank you. You're so welcome. And again, I appreciate it so much.
All right, friends. Well, y'all take care, and hopefully we'll be seeing each other again soon.
All right. We'll see you soon, guys. Thanks.